Webinar started and it's being recorded. Great. Hi, everyone. Do you want the microphone, Andrea, or do you not? Yes, okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our March workshop. We are joined today by Andrea from Old National Bank, who is going to speak with us about investing and personal financial planning. If you have any questions, we're going to ask those questions as we go. So for those who are here with us tonight in person, please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question whenever you'd like. And for those who are joining us virtually, please put your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat and I will ask them on your behalf. So please join me in welcoming Andrea this evening.
Thank you. Yeah, let's switch to the next slide. Do I need that over there?
Oh, I think we're going to need it.
Okay, perfect.
But if not, okay, we're gonna see. I should be able to do it with this.
Okay, awesome. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here in person and virtually. And as Kelsey shared, I'm Andrea Gordon. I'm with Old National Bank, and I'm our community outreach officer in the market. And I have a team that I work with. Musa Ibrahim, who's also one of our financial empowerment officers. And we work closely together to bring financial information to the communities that we serve. And so I'm appreciative for the opportunity to be here tonight and to kind of talk through investing and financial planning. And it's an exciting time to talk about this topic in light of what's happening in our world at large. And so we're going to dig in and talk about some ways that we can be very effective in terms of planning for our future financially. So again, the topic tonight that we're going to discuss is investing and financial planning. And we'll go to the next slide. And so one of the first questions or comments that we want to focus on is this concept around why people invest. Like, why is investing so important? And, you know, the plan is that we're going to live for a very long time, and we're going to need money to sustain ourselves as we live. And so investing is so critically important because it affords us the opportunity to plan for our future and to be able to live a life that is comfortable and financially provided for as a result of our planning efforts earlier on in life. So the next slide, we start to deal with the concepts around financial planning. I'm going to see if I can move this up just a little bit so I can see the slides. I didn't realize I wouldn't be able to see all of this. Is that
Oh yeah, we can still see you. Is that good for you?
Yeah, let me move just a teeny tiny bit.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. There we go. I can see a little bit better.
Perfect.
So the first thing when we think about financial planning is we want to think about your vision. What is it that you want to accomplish? And you have to be able to envision where you are, where you've been, and where you would like to be in terms of planning for your financial future. The second things that we want to consider is, you know, we can kind of see in our world today, gas prices are up, inflation is up, the price of food is up. A lot of things are happening financially that are impacting our lives, and the planning helps us to kind of bridge the gap and maintain or sustain our quality of life as we go through these various financial cycles. One of the other things that we want to consider is your money working for you? So when you save, when you invest, when you prepare for the future, you should be able to reasonably expect a rate of return on what you are investing. There's, you know, I always say, you know, if you're investing in your kids, you expect a return on that at some point, right? Those kiddos are going to grow up and be able to sustain themselves maybe even someday do a few nice things for mom and dad. So the cycle of life is that we absolutely invest and expect a rate of return on the things or the people, the relationships that we invest in. And so one of the other aspects that we want to talk about is your definitions. Envisioning what financial security means to you is one of the very first steps. Thinking about, what does financial security mean to you? Does it mean being able to retire at a certain age? Does it mean being able to provide for your kids to go to college? Does it mean being able to not have to worry about living from paycheck to paycheck? What does financial security mean to you? And that's a personal definition, but we have a very strategic and methodical way that we can think about accomplishing those sorts of things. Next slide. All right, so when we talk about why people decide to invest, when we think about that, these are some of the things that we want to consider. It provides us a level of security. Now, we know that some of these tools that are listed on the screen right now, Social Security, various other streams of income may or may not be available as we transition into retirement later in life. Ideally, these things will be available to us and we will be able to tap into them and have that added stream of income. But the reality is that they may not necessarily be there. And if they aren't there, then, and we've waited and planned solely for those things to have as to support ourselves financially, we could be in trouble. So it's important to think about securing our income and making sure that we take control of our investing and plan for our own stream of income as we move forward. Next slide. All right. And I'm reading this a little sideways here. So the next slide talks about how we think about investing and the ways that we can be mindful of that. Does this come out of here by chance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, maybe I can do that way. I know we've got some people here on the screen too, so I'll be mindful of that. That may help, yeah, because I can come back here. And so when we think about common reasons to invest, some of those common reasons are listed on the screen right now, and you can think about those common reasons why we invest and why it's so important. And investing, again, is a strategy. It's a plan for the future. It's an opportunity to realize how we can sustain ourselves because we are always planning to live. And because we're planning to live, we need to plan to provide for ourselves financially. So next slide. Okay. And on this slide, we're talking about financial independence and goal barometers, right? And we're talking about cash flow and net worth. You know, you kind of have to decide what your cash flow is like. Let me take just a quick survey. We've got a couple of people in the room right now. Does anyone know what your net worth is today? Okay, so understanding your net worth is one of the key strategies to being able to plan for your financial future. And if we're going to talk about understanding what your net worth is in some of the upcoming slides, but I would encourage you at your own time and at your own leisure that you kind of sit down and maybe walk through an exercise online or get a book that would speak to this topic and think about your own personal net worth and what is your net worth. Now, the thing about understanding your net worth is that you're more than a number, right? We qualify ourselves with credit scores and net worth and checking account balances, and all those things are very, very important and can never be diminished, but we're more than just numbers, right? We're people, we have lives, we have challenges, we have issues, we have problems that we have to overcome. And so while it's important to remember these things and to know these numbers, it's also important to remember that life happens and that if you're in a place where maybe your net worth is not where you want it to be, there's always an opportunity to improve those numbers. So next slide. All right, so now we're going to get into some good stuff. We're going to talk about investment risk. And I want to get into the slide, but before I do that, I always like to make these interactive. And so if you're online, you can certainly type into the chat and answer a question. But when you see those two words, investment risk, what do you think? What does that bring to mind? Anybody? Investment risk.
Stock market.
Yeah, stock market. Very good. So have you looked at the stock market lately by chance? No? A little bit? Okay. So needless to say, right, we're on the verge of a potential war, right? And there's a lot of volatility in the market, right? The market is up, it's down, it's a lot of volatility. And prior to things happening in Europe, there was a little more stability in terms of a daily return on our investments in the stock market. But now we're seeing a lot of volatility. And so when we think about investment risk and we think about the volatility of the market, we're going to talk about ways that we can mentally and emotionally work through that so that we don't ultimately do ourselves a disservice. Next slide. All right. So when we think about investment risk, we want to think about our strategy for investing. Think about the ways that we want to strategize around investing. One of the first things we want to be mindful of is evaluating our comfort level with risk. Now, there are a lot of factors that come into play when you evaluate your risk level. For example, when I was, 23 years old and just getting started in banking, I think I was in every aggressive, investment that I could potentially go into, right? Because I had a whole lot of years of working ahead of me, and I had ample time to recover from any of the volatility of the market. But now, you fast forward and you get into your 50s and you're thinking, I don't have as many years left. So I cannot allow myself to take as many risks today as I may have taken when I was 23 years old. And so when you think about risk volatility and when you think about evaluating your comfort level, these are the kinds of things that you want to keep in mind. And I will say at Old National Bank, one of the things that we do really well is that when a person comes in to consider making an investment with us, there is a process that we follow to determine your risk tolerance. And that helps us to evaluate kind of how we need to manage your investments to ensure you have the best outcome possible. One of the other things that's important is identifying risks associated with certain investments. Again, when you work with a financial planner or you work with a financial advisor or an investment officer, one of the things that they should absolutely be talking to you about is how to identify risks associated with certain investments. As of today, you probably wouldn't necessarily want to be invested in anything, maybe in Russia, right? Because there's a war that's happening there, right? And these are the kinds of things that you have to be mindful of when you're thinking about how your money is going to be invested. If you're working with a person who understands the market, understands risk, and is a good financial advisor, they will know how to guide you through making sure that your funds are invested for your future financial planning and for you to, again, have the best outcome possible. The last one we'll talk about is measuring risk and potential rewards. Everybody's heard this concept or this thought around when you invest, you have to invest for the long term. You can't invest for the short term. If you're in it and you see your balance going down and you jump out, you miss the recovery and the growth opportunities that come after those losses. So you really have to think about measuring risk and potential rewards. And again, if you're working with a really good financial planner, they will help you to navigate through that so that you realize the returns that you want to and the rewards that you desire. Next slide. All right, so on this slide, we're talking about what is risk. And it gives us some definitions of what risk is as it relates to financial planning and investing. What is risk? And it gives us one of these is the chance that an investment will not go as planned. There can absolutely be times, again, where you might invest funds and you look at your balance and you think, oh my goodness, I'm losing money. That's going to happen. When you're investing and you're planning for the future, you're going to suffer losses. But the plan is that as you stay in the market for an extended period of time, you're going to recover those losses and your gains are going to exceed your losses, and you're going to grow a nest egg. And all of the forecasting and projecting and planning will help you to get there. Next slide. All right, so I really like this slide because it's very simple. It's just telling us, when you're thinking about risk and you're thinking about return, your returns a lot of times will look like the 3 green discs, while your risk will kind of oftentimes look more like the red discs. But the reality is that over time, your rate of return will exceed your principal balance as you maintain your position in the market. Now, you may have to reallocate your funds occasionally. You may have to say, if you have a 401k, if you have a 403b, if you have stocks that you're invested in, you may have to go to your financial advisor and reevaluate your allocation. You may have to say, hey, listen, I'm not comfortable. I'm getting my statements and I'm seeing losses, and I'm seeing those over a sustained period of time, and I'm not comfortable, and I'd like to reallocate. And if you work with a great company, and I'm sure you do, they will help you to navigate through that reallocation so that you can hold on to more of your principal and then still grow at the same time over the long haul. Next slide. All right, so our next slide deals with risk tolerance. And again, as we're talking through this, as we did a couple of minutes ago, you know what your risk tolerance is, right? You know what you're comfortable with. You know how much time you have left to work. You know what you need to accomplish in retirement. If you've got to take care of yourself, if you've got to take care of a loved one, if you have to pay a mortgage, if your mortgage is paid off, you know the various things that impact or affect your financial picture. And when you think about this concept of risk tolerance, none of us ever want to invest to lose. But at the same time, there are going to be losses along the way. But when you plan your risk, you can mitigate those so that you still realize a return in the end. Next slide. All right, so this slide deals with common types of risks. And it starts at the top with dealing with inflation and right down to political risk and everything in between. And you can see this slide is particularly relatable today because of what we see happening in our world at large. I was just a part of a meeting a little bit earlier today, and we were talking about investments and some of the challenges with investment and the topic around potential war in the country and all of those challenges. And so all of these things listed on this right side speak to that: market risk, opportunity risk, credit risk, business risk. And I kind of wish they would have one over there that said life risk, right? Children risk, right? All of these things come into play when we think about the impact that risks can play in our lives. But again, we can always plan. Some things are outside of our control, but a lot of things we can mitigate and plan for and expect a good return on our investment and our financial planning.
Alrighty, so this slide deals with how to reduce your risk. And you can see some of those are keeping your finances in order, risk capital, gain knowledge, due diligence, consistency. All of these things help us to mitigate our risk tolerance. Planning is key. I would say first and foremost, getting into the market is key, because if you're missing being in the market, then you're missing incredible opportunity. I always encourage clients that if you're not in your 401k, go ahead and get in your 401k, and at a minimum, make sure that you're investing up to the match that your company provides. If you have a 403b, make sure you're in your 403b. If for some reason your company doesn't offer, you're self-employed, make sure you're getting into a Roth IRA or some sort of investment vehicle that will enable you to have some sort of rate of return in an effort to plan for your financial future. All right, so I promised a little bit ago that we would talk about assessing your net worth. And I asked a question about, do you know what your net worth is? And we're going to get into this, and assessing your net worth is an interesting exercise because it brings into, it kind of sheds light on some of the things that we may not necessarily be thinking about on a daily basis when we think about our finances. And your net worth is a very, very important number. A lot of times, celebrities and people like that are assessed based on their net worth. So we're going to get into this. Go ahead. All right, so calculating your net worth. This is the strategy for calculating your net worth. It's your assets minus your liabilities. Your assets minus your liabilities. And when we think about our assets, some of the things that come into consideration are your cash, your retirement savings, your stocks, your bonds, the equity in your home, your savings account, your checking account, rental properties, all of these things, your retirement accounts, all of these things are considered your assets. And then your liabilities are all of the bills that you pay. Your personal loans, student loans, credit cards, auto loans, all of those things, any sort of debt that is outstanding. So your assets minus your liabilities equals your net worth. Now, what I found a lot of times is that we can have sometimes a negative net worth, right? Because you have a mortgage on your house, you got a car note, you may have a student loan, you may have a little bit of credit card debt, and then you may have, a savings account or a 401k or a 403b, and those balances have not grown enough to exceed the balances that you're carrying on the liability side. And that's okay. That's okay. The key is to continue to work to make sure that you're bringing your outstanding debts down and you're bringing your savings or your assets up. And that's how you eventually arrive at a positive net worth. And when you get to a positive net worth, it's a really good feeling because you realize like you've been doing a really good job of managing your money very well. It's a great indicator of how you're managing your finances. So what is your net worth? A calculation that gives you a snapshot of your financial position. It helps notice trends and tracks progress. It makes it easy to prioritize your financial outcomes. All of these things contribute to your net worth. And again, I've worked with clients who, when we started working together, they may have had a negative net worth, and within a few years, they managed to turn it around, and they now have a positive net worth. Am I okay on time?
Yes, it is 6:27.
Okay, perfect. All right, so how to calculate your net worth is simply what I said before. You're going to subtract your liabilities from your assets. Okay, very simple. So what you can do is with a sheet of paper, you can even probably maybe do it while we're talking through this. You can, on one side of the paper, write assets, and then write down write down your assets on one side, and then on the next side, list all of the liabilities, total those up on each side, and then do subtract, and you got your number. It's very simple. All right, so assets, this kind of gives us a further breakdown of what our assets are. Again, things that are producing an income, a stream of income, or that create an equity position. So equity in your home, equity in investments, stocks, bonds, savings accounts, all of those things are assets. Okay? And then liabilities, the ones we don't always like so much. Student loans, credit card debt, mortgages, things of that nature. These are not negative things, they are life things, they're necessary that we have, but it's important that we work to pay them off. Again, this gives us a description of our assets minus our liabilities and our total net worth. So it's a good example. And then also further things to consider about your net worth. All right. So this one kind of breaks down for us the difference between our positive versus negative net worth. And I shared with you that oftentimes when you're doing this sort of work, you're gonna see maybe a negative number. It's okay. It's okay to see a negative number. Just know that you're not gonna stay there. All right, and I think this is the last part of our presentation. It's identifying your future needs. So when we think about financial planning, when we think about investing, and when we think about what we would like to accomplish financially, we must think about identifying our future needs. Because if you get to a place where you realize a positive net worth, you can lose that by not identifying what your needs are versus what your wants may be, and how to navigate through those so that you don't end up in a place where you have a negative net position again. So understanding, current budget circle versus your future budget circle. What are the things that are critical? What are the things that are necessary? What are the things that are not necessarily desires, but are they're needed things in my life, and you have to be able to distinguish between those. And so identifying those future needs becomes a critical component of our future financial planning and financial success. Okay, and then the next part deals with steps to creating a financial budget. Okay, it tells us to estimate your future income, plan your savings. All of these things are critically important, again, when we're thinking about assessing and creating a future, not only budget, but thinking about becoming financially secure, financially in a place where you feel good about your money and how your money is working for you, where there's no stress associated with it, but you're able to do the things that you need to do in a timely way and accomplish your financial goals. All right, so this slide deals with steps to create your future budget. And again, we've talked about budgeting in the series. Throughout the entire series, we've talked about future income sources, planning your savings, estimating future expenses, and then calculating the effects of inflation, okay? Now, right now, with everything being incredibly expensive as a result of what's happening in our world, it could be a little bit more difficult to navigate through inflation costs. I went to the gas station the other day to fill my tank up, and what would normally run me about $60 almost $90 later, right? So inflation is real. These costs are very real. But this is why the savings aspect is so important, because it will help to carry us through these moments that we're experiencing today. All right. What can a dollar buy, right? You can tell this might be slightly dated, right? Just a little bit. But no, it's not very, in other words, the message is the same. There's not a whole heck of a lot that you can buy for $1. Yeah, they used to have these little thing called penny candies when I was growing up, the little candies that cost like a penny. Yeah, those don't exist anymore, right? Even the penny candy went up, right? Like it's now 25 cents, 50 cents for a piece of candy, right? So $1 does not go as far today as it once did, but that doesn't mean that we're not still able to realize financial success and to accomplish our financial goals. It just means that maybe we have to be a little bit more strategic, more disciplined, and more consistent in our efforts. All right, so accounting for inflation. Goodness, inflation is very real right now. I talk to people in the course of my work, and some of the challenges that many families are facing today, very, very real things that are challenging in multiple ways. But it just reiterates, and it certainly speaks to the importance of this kind of planning and strategizing and thinking through, so that our money does not control us, but so that we control our money. And we make sure that we use it in the best way to serve us and to help us take care of ourselves and our families. All right. Oh, we have one more section. Okay. I'll go through this one pretty quickly. All right, investment preparation. All right, so you can kind of see on this one, again, giving us some guidance around preparing ourselves. I really like this last one because it talks about consistency. And consistency, in my opinion, is the key aspect to all of this, is our ability to be consistent. When you're investing in your 401k and your savings account is down because your emergency fund is depleted because life circumstances have happened, there will be a temptation to pull out of that 401k and say, I need this money in my paycheck. But if we can develop a level of discipline and consistency in keeping those funds going there, it will make a big difference for us. All right. And then building your investment foundation. And this goes to, I love what Mid-North Promise is doing through this series, because there's a commitment to sharing information. And, we grew up with the motto that said, knowledge is power, right? The sharing of information is so powerful. And when we can digest the information and we apply it, it can really make the difference in our lives. And so being able to think about building our investment foundation is being able to receive the information that's being shared and thinking about how we can apply it to our lives, and then how we can help ourselves, not just in terms of what we accomplish, but how it can have a generational impact, how we can demonstrate those good financial principles in front of our children in an effort to help them to maybe not have some of the same challenges that we experience. So that foundation is something that you continue to build upon and that your children continue to build upon. And this highlights some of the things that you want to be mindful of. You find you a team of people that you trust, a banker, a bank, an investment advisor, financial planner. There's so many resources online that you can tap into, so that when questions and things come up, you have someone that you can trust, that you can go to and ask questions and be confident in the answers that you're receiving, and that someone always has your best interest at heart. All right, building your investment foundation, again, is continued with some of these principles that are outlined on this page. minimize high interest debt, make sure you've got that emergency fund to cover expenses. Think about exit plans. What would happen? What happens if for some reason there's a job loss? What happens if there's an accident? The plan is that we're going to live and be healthy, but we do have to prepare and think about if certain things transpire in our lives, how would we handle those, or how would our loved ones step up and handle those issues? All right. Greed and fear affect and investment decisions. I love this one, right? Because fear can be very real. When you're thinking about trying to invest for your future and you're looking at your bills and you're looking at the demands of life and you're looking at something that needs to be done to the car, something that needs fixed on the house, something the kids need, and then someone is saying, please invest, and you're like, what? Are you serious, right? No, I'm trying to survive, forget investing, but again, we have the power to start making a difference and setting the stage for our future financial success by being thoughtful, consistent, and strategic around how we even think about investing, and certainly how we apply investing concepts to our lives. And so this one kind of deals with, where are you on this spectrum? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a person that's gripped with fear, or do you see yourself as a person that's ready to understand and take methodical and thoughtful action as it relates to investing in your funds and taking those risks for financial success and financial planning? All right. Common ways people get off track, lack of a plan is a big one. Not having a plan, making poor financial choices is another one. We have to think about making good decisions. Anybody can make a bad decision here and there. It's not the end of the world. You're not gonna lose everything as a result of that. It's making sure that the majority of our decisions are in the right direction over time.
You have 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes, okay. All right. I'm like, this thing doesn't end, okay. What's going on here? All right, yeah, Kelsey did something to it. Okay, personal retirement plans. Go ahead and give me the next one. So when we think about personal retirement plans, we think about income that's funded with, that's taxed income versus non-taxed income, right? And so we know when we're contributing to our 401k that those funds are not taxed. They go directly into our retirement account and they bypass any sort of taxing application, and it goes directly to us and we bypass that. Now, we only bypass that for that season, right? Because then when you get ready to go into retirement, those funds are taxed at a later date. But the idea is that you might be entering into a lower tax bracket and your tax may be less. And then also, there's some other benefits that go along with that. So I always say, if you have an opportunity to invest in a 401k or 403b, and you're not doing that, you're leaving money on the table, big time. And no one in this life can afford to leave money on the table. So we want to make sure we get or take advantage of our individual retirement accounts. If you have, if you don't have that, if you're an entrepreneur maybe, and you don't have access to those other products, there are products that you can take advantage of that are offered through banks, Old National Bank, that are offered through financial investment firms, but you just want to make sure you do your due diligence and do your research so that you're not being taken advantage of. All right. So main types of IRAs, again, we talked about the Roth IRA, traditional IRA. Make sure that you're getting into something. And it's okay to have multiple vehicles, right? You may have a 401k and you may also have a Roth IRA. You may have a 403b and you may have an IRA at a financial institution. So diversification is amazing. The power of diversification is really good. But I would say before you think about diversifying, go ahead and gain a lot of stability and consistency with what's available to you right now. And then think about broadening. Real estate is another great vehicle. All right. 401k, 403b, SEP IRAs, all these are great tools to think about investing. And deciding between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, again, go ahead and just do your due diligence, do your research, and you can find out which product is best for you. I think that's my time. So thank you, everybody.
Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, any questions or anything?
401, is it 401, 403B?
Yes.
So what is that? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so typically a 403B, if you're a teacher, teachers, educators typically are all, they, instead of having a traditional 401k, they will have, it's a similar product, but it's called a 403B. Same thing like maybe if you're in the not-for-profit sector, sometimes you have a 403, yeah, they will have a 403B versus a 401k, but it's very similar. It accomplishes the same thing, it's just money that's being set aside on your behalf, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, please.
I know you had mentioned working with a client who had started off with a negative net worth and moved into a positive net worth over time. And I was just wondering if you could speak to some of the action items that that person took. Certainly it took time, but I would just love to hear a little bit more about that if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, that's a really good question. Yeah, so, you know, the process of walking through and understanding their assets, their liabilities, and their net worth. So when you look at those assets, you understand, you know, the good things you got going for you, right? Those assets, that good stuff. Then when you look at the liabilities, you will see the opportunities, right? You see where you can start to think about paying down debt to bring those liabilities down, the mortgage, the credit cards, the student loans, personal loans, things of that nature, auto loans. You think about how you're going to pay those things down. So that's exactly what this particular client did. Was they sat down, they looked at everything, and they decided what they wanted to accomplish. Their goal was to have a positive net worth and to have it within a certain time frame. And then they decided how every month they could apply their income to start to pay down their debt. And as they paid down their debt, they recalculated those numbers over a period of time. They could see where they went from negative to positive. And that's exactly how they accomplished that. And it's, you know, sometimes when you look at those numbers, it can seem overwhelming, right? Because if you have a mortgage or auto loan or student loans, you know, you can certainly feel like, how am I ever gonna, you know, get out of this debt, right? Like, how am I ever gonna climb out of this? But being consistent and being strategic and methodical, I've seen people do it many, many, many times. So it's absolutely possible to accomplish.
Awesome, thank you.
Anything else?
Chat is good. We're good there. Well, I can wrap up real quick.
Absolutely.
Andrea. Thank you so much.
I don't want to turn that
was
off.
Very informative. I know, I always accidentally turn it off.
Thank you.
I do.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I had one deal that it wasn't going anywhere. I was making payments, making more. I was trying to make more than what they saying. And it was just not going nowhere. But after I evaluated stuff I needed to, it was bills, other things getting charged to it, like Groupon, I got an issue. But Groupon and stuff like that, that was the account that was going into coming out of. So I went to the bank and looked into a lower interest rate and just paid off that. And then now I'm paying on a lower interest rate.
Yeah.
So I'm done with, you know, because that was like retarded.
No, you bring up a really good point
Do you want the
because
mic back, Andrea,
sure.
so that you can?
maybe just briefly phrase the question?
Yes.
And then
Sure. So she's asking a question about, maybe having like a credit card. It sounds like maybe that some additional, you were trying to pay it down, but then fees were being assessed, or, monthly subscriptions are being assessed. And if you're trying to pay it down and it keeps staying the same or going up, and you're like, what's going on? Like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. So you raised a really good question. That whole conversation around, I heard someone say, we're not necessarily being $100 a month, charged anymore, but now we're being nickel and dime by a month. These monthly subscriptions, right? $5 here, $10 there, $20 here. And that's how, so we have to be so careful to take a look at those credit card statements, and develop a strategy around how we're going to apply for subscriptions so that we don't have to go to multiple places to process through cancellations, because they make it really difficult, right? When you want to try to cancel something, they make it really difficult to do that. So I love that you say that, because that's happening. We see that quite a bit. And one of the strategies I'm trying to apply to make sure that doesn't happen is I try to put things through my PayPal account, all of my subscriptions through PayPal, because what happens with PayPal is that you can go in there and you can stop anything, and they don't ask questions. It's you set it up, and when you get ready to cancel it, end of story, it's canceled. So developing a strategy like that makes it a lot more convenient to not only see what's happening with your account, because it's one credit card and one provider. It's not multiple credit cards and multiple vendors or providers that you're having to go to. So I would encourage you to think about something like that, but that's a great point. So yeah, and then probably once you got those canceled and taken off there, you can start to see that balance coming down. Yeah, good
Because
stuff.
what happened, because you might get a loan, and then you might have to get you be paying on a loan, and then you might have to get a smaller loan or something happened. But basically, they ended up with 2 different interest rates. So I went from like 7.7, and then the other one was like 8 something. So I was paying like 22 point something %.
Yeah.
So I got a loan that's like, I think it's 5.7% interest rate.
Yeah. So
Like, man, it gets you. It's
listen.
so comfortable. You don't sit down. I don't sit down consistently and just evaluate. Looking into details like you said.
Most Americans we're not paying attention, and it's happening to us. And so yes, you raised some really good points. Just kind of thinking about going in on an annual basis, and when you do have bills that you're paying, looking at those interest rates, because a lot of times companies will give you a lower rate. It's just a matter of knowing that what you're paying and then making that phone call, taking the time to do that. I shared in an earlier class that typically in January is when I will go and get a copy of my credit report. And I'll take a look at everything that's out there, make sure that it's my stuff first and foremost, because you could be surprised about who's got credit in your name and they're just enjoying themselves. And you're suffering from it in the process. So, but evaluating the credit report, the credit cards, the interest rates, the fees, the subscriptions, I typically try to do those things in January so that I know that I'm setting the pace for the rest of the year to make sure that my finances are being handled in the way that I would want them to. So thank you for asking those questions.
Great questions. Thank you, Andrea. Those are really helpful tips too. I like those ideas.
no problem. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We have another workshop coming up at this time next week. So that's going to be Thursday, the 17th. That one is more of a panel. It's going to be called College Questions Answered. And we have representatives from 5 different colleges coming to talk about the admissions process, the scholarship process. Really, just everyone's welcome to bring their individual questions to this event. And we hope to answer some of those questions and really get people feeling more prepared for that specific post-secondary opportunity. So that will be next week. We'll send out some emails, and you can still access all of the future workshops from the website on the Children's Museum, or our page on the Children's Museum's website. And we are doing a raffle at the end of every workshop. So I will be finalizing that probably tomorrow. And then the winner from this workshop will be contacted. And so of course we're doing one next week as well. So we hope to see you all next week. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
There we go. I
If you
turned
have
it off.
any information about that, I'd like to pass that along.
Oh,
to
yeah,
others, to
absolutely.
people
Let
that
me
might benefit
forward
from
it
that.
to you.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I turn our Zoom off.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you both.